Let me ask you a question, UConn fans. Can you truly be great at something if you're not obsessed with it, like Dan Hurley and his staff is? Let's talk about it. You're Locked On UConn.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Little housekeeping for me, YouTube support. Keep it going, man. It's been amazing. Keep getting new subscribers every day. I'd love to have all of those subscribers download the audio version wherever you get your podcasts. It's equally as important for helping the channel and the Locked On UConn audience grow. So if you can do me two quick favors, first click that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen, then head over to Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, hit that follow button. This way you'll never miss a moment of Locked On UConn. I can't tell you how much your support means to me. It's everything. If you're tuning in from your car, once the show is over, make sure you don't do anything while you're driving, no texting and driving. Please drop us that 5-star review. Good reviews trigger audience referrals, helps other people get interested in more UConn content. So today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Well, the question of the day, and it's something that started yesterday on UConn Twitter. Can people be truly great at something if they're not obsessed with it the way Dan Hurley talks about him and his staff being obsessed about coaching? Yes, we're talking about the TikTok heard around the world, or just UConn Nation, UConn Twitter, and some of the sick PC Friar fans. I have some thoughts on this. I believe it was Jaden Ross, Isaiah Abraham, and Jalen Stewart who were in the video. If I'm missing a player, they were doing that little dance that I feel like everyone is made famous by Jared McCain and his, I think he has something like 3.5 million TikTok followers. And it's also been a point of contention for UConn fans to make fun of Duke. And I can understand where UConn Twitter lands on this, that, we're not TikTok we're here to win championships. Let me take a sip of water. And I totally understand where people are coming from in that respect. And I've saw a couple of really great comments, saw some silly ones, some predictable ones on both good and bad, and the negative or the positive. And the first one, I feel like if there were jobs in UConn Twitter, Chris Smith of Bad Choice Milk on Twitter, from my hometown of Meriden, Connecticut, family member, married my cousin. This is a comment from him. There's two sides to this coin. If Hurley is literally going to use the phrase "he's not a TikToker" as a means of praising Steph Castle's basketball character, I think it's fair for fans to eye roll these behaviors. #UConn. And he shared an interview with Ryan Russillo talking about how he's not a TikToker, all that different stuff. And Chris is older than me. I think I don't want to misage Chris. He's probably in his mid-40s. I'm in my early to creeping up to that mid-40s, a couple years behind him. And I feel like we're of similar thought process there. And the reason why I bring Chris up is I feel like he always has a measured take and is pretty much the voice of reason. So I look at that perspective and I say, that's true. I think my opinion is Hurley means this as, do you want to come here to be popular on social media, or do you want to come here and be a basketball player? And I think they're not mutually exclusive. I think the frustration that probably UConn fans had was, don't do it in the sanctum that is the sanctity of the locker room. Don't bring that nonsense into a place where we're all trying to get locked in and win another banner like the ones that I have hanging behind me. I think that's the distinction. And I know, I believe I read that the video has been deleted. It's not even a bad video. It's them just doing a silly dance. I think it was like 8 seconds long. I saw it and it kind of was like, oh, some of the younger guys did a TikTok. I don't know. I also feel like this is also a great person that I follow on X, Mike Toscano. I think he goes by Ghost. Um, the actual answer is because UConn men's basketball is basically nirvana right now, and people need something to yell about. I can see that as well. I'm trying to hide these yawns. Didn't get much sleep last night. That's why I was under the weather. Almost didn't record today. Yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one for me because can you be a master of everything or a jack of all trades and a master of none? Right. Um, I think sometimes when you take joy, when you take the joy out of something, it becomes less enjoyable to be at the top of your profession. And I talked about this one, and I kind of almost got into it a little bit with a YouTube comment about how Dan Hurley should have been the most, the highest paid coach in basketball because it's a symbolic thing that he's the best coach in basketball. He may not have wanted that, but I feel like as fans, we wanted that for him. And someone commented that, it was a childish or a silly thing for me to say. But the reality is he talked about it in his presser. We're going to talk about his media availability after this is that, he's had an unusual path to being at the top of his profession with only 15 years ago just being a head coach at St. Benedict's. So I think he has the perspective, as he should, of a 51-year-old man that it can be taken from you in an instant, right? He had the situation where he saw his brother have an accident. I feel it was a motorcycle or car, I forget at the time, where Bobby Hurley was a promising player in the NBA, and he almost to the point was like, "Why? I wish that was me." So he's been at that dark recesses of being depressed, and I don't think money motivates him, but I do think success does, and I do think staying on task does. So when he sees his players doing things like TikToks and dancing in the locker room when they haven't really accomplished anything other than I think Jalen Short was in there, so he was a national champion, Jaden Ross, when they haven't accomplished anything this season and it's just everything's in front of them. I think that's the biggest thing. But I think you can be both. I maybe I'm wrong, and maybe that's why I wasn't the best tennis player in the world, or I wasn't, or I'm not the best golfer in the world, is because I'm good at a lot of things, but I'm not a master of them. That's and that is a totally okay place to be in life. I feel like I've accomplished a lot in my life, with my, with working on myself and being in great relationships. And I think that's something that is kind of an interesting topic for this UConn Twitter. And I'm curious to see what the comments will be. Do you guys truly believe, I know I'm not talking to anyone specifically, I'm talking to everyone that watches the show. Do you believe that you can be a successful basketball player at UConn and have interest outside of basketball? I think with the caveat is that you don't let it interfere with the sanctity of the locker room. I think that's my biggest, caveat of all of this. And maybe that's the happy medium. Who knows? Well, we're going to stop talking about this subject because in the reality, it's a big nothing burger, but it's July 9th and we're clamoring for UConn basketball. Watch Cam Spencer light up Summer League last night. We'll watch him again tonight. In his Zach Edey led Memphis Grizzlies along with Cam Spencer, and my good buddy from UNCG, Isaiah Miller, is on that Memphis team too. So UConn fans, if you're not familiar with Isaiah, he's not playing a ton, but kid's an incredible athlete, good guard. Anyway, we're going to move on, and we're going to talk about Dan Hurley's presser and some of the comments that I saw coming up after this. There's nothing like catching an MLB game in the summer. I remember last year where the atmosphere was electric, and if you go this year, it's memories like those that will keep me going back again, going in August to a game in Atlanta. Now getting tickets is a breeze with Game Time, an authorized MLB ticket marketplace. The closer to game time, the better the deals. I found some amazing last-minute tickets on the app, and I love that I can see the view from my seat before buying. Game Time makes it super easy with all-in pricing and their lowest price guarantee. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Don't miss out. Make every moment count with Game Time. Download today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Okay, we're back on Locked On UConn. I'm your host, Mark Zanetto. There's my tag. You can find me on X at Mark Zanetto CBB, or you can follow the show at Locked On UConn. Some pretty interesting comments in Dan Hurley's presser, like always. Was asked some really great questions from our wonderful beat reporters. We're going to have Joe Arruda on tomorrow. I was going to have him on today, but since I've been kind of under the weather, I just wanted to jump on and do a quick pod, and then we'll get his thoughts going forward. So Dan Hurley press highlights, talked about his contract and family, really expressed gratitude for the contract extension, what that means for his family going forward, acknowledged the reward was significant for him and his family, really called it humbling. You can really tell why people relate to Dan Hurley because I hate to use this word, but you can almost, it almost feels embarrassing to him that he has to talk about making millions of dollars coaching basketball, because at the heart of it, here's a guy, he's called himself exactly this, a one-trick pony. He is not a master of universe that's talking about business and stocks and real estate and investments. He is a tried and true OG basketball coach. He praised his coaching staff and the contributions to his success. Really talked about, his coaching career. I think there was a great question. Sometimes it's tough. You only see Dan, and I'm not in the building, so I'd love to credit everyone. I did see a great question from Dave Borges that I'll talk about later when he talks about the team potential. And I'm pretty sure I heard Joe ask a couple really cool questions, but I'll leave that for him tomorrow. But so apologize to any beat reporters who I'm hearing the question. I think it's a great question, and I'm relaying it to the fans here in a podcast form. So I think that's important to highlight, is that there's some really great questions, poignant ones around his coaching staff. And he talked about right off the bat that he had a great coaching staff at Wagner with his brother and Donald Brashear, who's a D1 head coach. Had Luke Murray at Wagner. I mean, this is no disrespect to Wagner. They were in my conference in college when I played tennis, but not exactly a basketball hotbed, right? It's not like, he's talking about North Carolina or, even Rhode Island where he coached, right? So really cool to have the roots of these great coaches, from many years ago, and how he progressed from college coaching to reestablishing his career from low major to now high major programs. Emphasized how it's really cool that he's been able to lay the groundwork for his family and his sons, the grind through, showing his wife and family from his 20s through his 30s, 40s, and now in his 50s being at the top of his profession. Proudly mentioned that his time at St. Benedict's was just 15 years ago. That was the reemergence of Dan Hurley as a coach. So, the stuff about the assistant coaches, stress the importance of how difficult it is to hire assistants, because he needs to share his work obsession with them. Praised Luke Murray and Kamani Young for their strengths in recruiting, player development, psychological tactics in creating relationship building, the ability to build trust. Acknowledged Tom Moore's veteran experience, being a 4-time national champion, saying he's been through wars in that respect, and how that really blends well with the team to have a veteran who's had head coaching experience at Quinnipiac, recognize the challenges of working under his demanding style. So I think he is, if anything, Dan Hurley is self-aware with requiring assistants to forego work-life balance. You hear that a lot. I've been in talent acquisition and consulting for years, and most consultants talk about work-life balance. If they're a consultant for many years, they look to, as time goes on, start to, instead of work balance, they're looking for that work-life balance. So he got a chuckle out of saying that. And this was the Dave Borges question. So shout out to Dave, really appreciate him, about the team's potential. And Hurley mentioned the talent level and potential of the group, which is, he said, is very similar. Discuss the development of players like, he said, he's got 2 really talented centers, and he's got Youssef developing. So can they, I think the really interesting stuff that I remember about the presser is, in his, kind of reading between the lines, is he said this before, why they have a chance at a three-peat is not because they're as good as they were last year, They may be as talented, but will they get the same production? Are they going to get the same type of production they got from Donovan and Samson, from Terrace, and from Youssef? That remains to be seen. Do they need it that need to be at that same level, almost at NBA level? Probably not, because remember, this is one of the most efficient offensive teams in the last 30 years, and was a top 5 defensive efficiency team. So he talked about, discussed noted competition from the guards, from Hassan, Aiden, Solo Ball. Same thing. Are they going to get the same type of production they just got from Tristan, from Cam, and utilizing some of these guys in a very similar way? Are they going to get some of that from Ahmad Noel? Admitted to 100%. Talked about how the competition for starting positions in bench roles for that, like 4th starter, 5th starter, first guy off the bench, second guy off the bench, are going to be really fierce, and it's starting to really pick up. I think I read somewhere that Liam McNeely turned his ankle. I didn't hear that part of the press conference. I got dragged into a meeting, but I'm sure he'll be fine. It's early in the season. Better to do it now than mid-season. Apparently it happened over the 4th of July weekend. I saw some really funny comments that, like I turned my ankle on 4th of July too, and it was perfectly fine. Probably had a few too many drinks. Take it easy, Liam. Discuss NIL and revenue sharing, how that's coming down the pike, and some of the new TV deals. Really expressed admiration for AD Dave Benedict, called him DB. We've had Dave on the show. We'd love to have him back, kind of talking about the new TV deal and streaming platforms. And this is a typical old guy comment. It was initially weary of streaming, but when people talk about ratings, no one watches traditional TV anymore unless they're watching sports. And I say no one, not everyone, right? Younger people typically watch some kind of streaming, and it shows the value of that by adding HBO Max, by adding some of the partners that they've added. I feel like Peacock is one of them because of NBC. So he said after he saw football on Amazon over the holidays, he was kind of sold on it, that these people are still going to go here to watch stuff. So yeah, I mean, we're in a good spot there. I don't know if it was Joe. We'll ask him. If someone asked him, do you ever have time to reflect or enjoy moments of success? The finer things I heard was said. He enjoyed throwing out the first pitch at Yankee Stadium and other kind of celebratory moments, like going to the White House or the parade. But mostly he focuses on the next practice and getting the non-conference schedule ready for the masses to talk about. Believes in the importance of hard work and competition over kind of social media and transfer portal. I think that's where some stuff that we talked about in the last segment is very interesting to me, because, look, Dan Hurley is who he is. He is never going to be okay with people not being locked in as much as him. And I also feel like there were some times where I always questioned the relationship with him and Tristan Newton, was because Tristan is so laid back and so chill and has that kind of Houston, whatever, man. But he is a hard worker. And I think that's the difference, is not everyone has to be like Dan Hurley, but you have to understand him, and you have to want to play for him, play his style, and have that be in the framework of what you do. And that intensity has to show. He mentioned Isaiah Abraham has impressed. Needs to work on his shooting and his ball handling, but his comment, which was very interesting, was, a lot of players come in and you can tell, they're exactly who you thought they were. Some a little worse, some a little better. Isaiah's been better, which is great to hear. Good news. He's going to need it because this team is super talented. And for all intents and purposes, he seems like the guy that would be the odd man out, but he's forcing the issue. I love it. And I love that Dan Hurley does that, to kind of put his name out there so that he knows that it's not going unnoticed. So that potential is exceeding the initial expectation, which is great. The last little piece was just about the salary and the market value in terms of the Lakers stuff. I think I get this interesting thing from him, which is the idea that he was kind of afraid to take on the Lakers. Dan Hurley basically said that he had this contract for weeks on weeks on weeks. He just didn't have a chance to read through it. He was kind of focused on what he wanted to focus on. And so that's why the extension took longer than it did. So that's classic Dan Hurley, not really worried about anything other than just basketball. So, but I don't know about you guys, but are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you daily to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'll talk about the predictive analytics of Bart Torvak picking us 12th next year. 12th? Are you sure, Bart? We'll talk about it. We're back. Short segment. I don't have much to say about Bart Torvak. Just gave myself a thumbs up. If you're watching on YouTube, that's what that thumbs up was for. Bart Torvak is, I'm going to give his ultimate definition. I don't want to piss anybody off because I love to have these guys on because like Evan Mayakaya from is going to jump on the show during the season. He's taking some time off, but if you go on Bart Torvak, he has what's called fun analytics. They do customizable rankings. Like if you go right now, so you click on it, Connecticut was 1, Houston was 2, and it's like where they finished last season and everything that goes with it. So it's very similar to Ken Pom. So I haven't looked if Ken Pom put out any predictive analytics for next year. Probably not. Maybe he did. I doubt it. Nope, still 2024. So this is a preseason, seeing where people are going to be. So for 24-25. And where he has UConn is 12th. And I find that very interesting considering what they have coming back. But I also feel like it's partly because of the unknowns of the 4 gentlemen that we talk about on a daily basis, which is, Jaden Ross, Solo Ball, Jalen Stort, Yusef Singari. And then you have, guys like Liam McNeely, Ahmad Noel, Isaiah Abraham, not to mention Aiden Mahaney, Hassan Diarra coming in as a starter, potentially Samson transitioning to more of a starting role. So I get all that. I just think it's funny because you really do fire up a team that's won back-to-back national championships and has them behind Houston, Duke, Iowa State, Kansas, Tennessee, North Carolina, Auburn, Alabama, Gonzaga, Arizona, Texas. Creighton's 1 spot behind them. So he has St. John's in his top 15 as his predictive analysis. Who else that's a surprise for me on this? Some surprises, I guess, would be Kentucky at 23. I feel like they've put together a pretty good roster. Rutgers, again, I mean, prove it to me. They got a good recruiting class, but can they put it all together? Purdue without Zach Edey. What are they going to be like? And they're in the top 16. Okay. Wake Forest at 32. Kansas State at 30. They've done a pretty good job. This is an interesting one, too. Arkansas. I feel like Arkansas is going to be a lot higher on people's rankings. But this is, again, I don't know how he goes about doing his analytics. But I do know that he has also picked preseason number 60 for UConn, the year they won their 5th national championship. So 2023, that's what they were ranked. I can't find the preseason 24 ones. I would imagine UConn was pretty high. But just adding more fuel to the fire. That's all it is. And Bart, if you want to come on the show and explain how you come up with the numbers you come up with, I'd love to have you. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Now it's also available on the Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. This has been another episode of Locked On UConn. I'm your host, Mark Zanetto, asking you to stay locked in, stay connected. Make sure your toughness meter is always rising. And as always, go Huskies.